Julie Goldberg is a librarian who wrote this great article that I'm going to read for you. You can email her at perfecthold@gmail.com and follow her on Twitter at Julie Goldberg. So I'm going to read you this article from perfecthold.wordpress.com. It's called I Can't Believe You're Throwing Out Books. Posted on May 16, 2011. I am a librarian but no longer a bibliophile. Throwing out thousands of books in 3 libraries over the past 9 years has cured me of bibliophilia. Though nothing on this side of morality can ever release me from my thraldom to stories, to the written word, to the English language in all its bastardized brilliance. What I'm done with is the fetishization of the codex. With books for books' sake, I see no point in stockpiling stories that no longer speak to anyone. Scientific knowledge decades out of date, speculations about the future that never came to pass, information shaped blithely by racism and the sexism of its time. But more than anything else, I'm finished with the idea that books, just by their virtue of existence, are precious things that can never outlive their usefulness. The visceral response some of us have against a threat to books is rooted deep within us. When I was a child, if my mother saw me writing in a book or treating it carelessly, she would scold, "Never do that to a book. Books are our friends." Jewish custom dictates that if a prayer book falls to the floor, that the book be picked up and kissed. And I've seen even not particularly observant Jews follow this tradition. Our schools and libraries are full of signs and posters trumpeting the value of books. Even people who never read decorate their homes with books. The less they like to read, the likelier that the books will be handsome leather-bound sets. Books, even if we don't read them, deserve respect, love even. Only an ignorant thug would destroy a book, and throughout history, many dangerous, violent people moving on to human targets. But it does not follow that there is never a good reason to get rid of a book. People who protest to me and other librarians about the abomination of libraries throwing out books imagine themselves as heroes in a story about book burning, maybe Fahrenheit 451, or the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Maybe they are monks saving civilization from the barbarian hordes. And I throwing out a 3rd copy of The Thorn Birds. Whenever teachers or students in my current school libraries see the withdrawn volumes filling up a few recycling bins, some of them ask me in tones of outrage what they believe is a rhetorical question. How can you, a librarian, possibly throw out books? It takes a long argument to explain that. It is precisely because I am a librarian that I throw out books. A librarian throws out books because no one else dares to do it. And it must be done. Realizing that people object so strongly to throwing out books, I began to save a few of the most egregious examples to show people who get upset. The library owned a book entitled Careers for Women that showed secretary, piano teacher, and flight attendant, but strangely enough, not public school teacher, let alone financial analysts specializing in mergers and acquisitions. An anthropology book called The Races of Man explained, scientifically of course, why some races were more evolved than others. A book originally published in the 19th century and gamely reprinted in the 1920s defended the early European settlers of North America, downplaying their casual brutality towards natives by recasting in light of their Christian intentions. Most of the discards were old, but some weren't. I put aside 2 books from the late 1990s, elucidating the scourge of satanic ritual abuse, and how students could protect themselves and their communities against it. These were the thin hardcovers you probably remember from your own middle school library, the ones designed for student reports, with lots of pictures and quotations from experts. While well-researched and decently written, these books had the rather serious drawback of shedding light on a crime that has since been proven not to exist. although not before a number of innocent people were thrown into prison for committing it. I lay out a few of these on the circulation desk for the incensed to examine. I know that I have to defend my destruction of school property, but I never expected to have the same argument almost verbatim every time I weeded. Do you think these books should be on a shelf in a school library? Long silences ensue while bibliophiles rethink their arguments. Clearly, these books don't belong on the shelves, but still, you can't throw out books. These books have historical value, then, is the next argument. We should keep the books, but flag them somehow so the kids know that these books are just there to demonstrate certain ideas from the past. Well, we don't teach historiography in our curriculum, I reply. No high school does. Besides, how could I ever make it clear to students that if this book about African tribes is valid, well-researched, and up-to-date, while this one, by the wife of a missionary who painted portraits of the interesting natives in their fascinating, although indecent, native costumes, is condescending, dated, and inaccurate, am I supposed to put a warning sticker on it? Student bibliophiles have lost interest and given up by this point, but teachers persist. You shouldn't throw them out, though. There are schools that don't have any books in their libraries whose budgets have been cut. Can't you donate them to Patterson? Poor Patterson. This argument to me smacks of patronizing classism, though kindly meant. We've already established that these books could do more harm than good and do not merit inclusion in the collection of our very well-off school's library. But give them to these poor Patterson kids, for whom the books would be that much worse for not having any more recent on the shelf to compare them to. Trust me, I tell them, no one wants these books. The parting plea is invariably that I should sell them on eBay and get the money for the school to buy new books. I wonder how much of a market people think there is for a book that we've already agreed cannot even be given away as a charitable gesture, although I was forced to reconsider when I saw both students and adults picking these absolutely worthless books out of the recycling and taking them home. What are you going to do with those? I asked a boy who I knew for a fact never reads under any circumstances. Well, you're throwing them out, right? Yes. So it doesn't matter what I do with them, right? He looked pretty nervous. He didn't want to get in trouble. So I'm just curious. I'm going to burn them. Well, that made sense. Many teenage boys are pyromaniacs, and burning books probably adds the wild anarchic thrill of the forbidden. But I could make no sense of what the middle-aged former lawyer whose substitute teaches at my school intended to do with the dozens he rescued from the bin. What are you going to do with those? I asked him. I thought he'd probably outgrown his pyromaniac phase. I'm going to add them to the shelves of my basement, he responded happily. What is your wife going to say when she sees you carrying 24 books that no one in their right mind would want in the house? She'll never know. She refuses to go down there. My sympathies were entirely with Mrs. Former Lawyer Substitute Teacher. So, who loves books more? The substitute teacher or me? To me, what matters about a book is the contents. To him, what matters is the book. He thinks I'm committing a sacrilege against civilization by discarding inaccurate, outdated books. I think he's committing an act of monumental inconsideration to his heirs, who will someday have to go through all those basement books that no one ever sees. What is it about a book that makes it a sacred object and not just an information delivery system? Every librarian has had frustrating phone calls from their community members cleaning out their attics or basements and generously offering the library their mildewed, water-damaged, dusty, or disintegrating books. Often vast mass-market paperback collections from the 60s and 70s, long-forgotten titles printed on the cheapest kind of paper, or 85 years of National Geographic. They want to know where to drop off books and magazines to donate them to the library. Many are shocked and offended to learn that both the public and school libraries generally do not accept donations of books that are more than 2 or 3 years old. Don't we want their grandmother's perfectly good collection of 40-year-old beach reads? What do I expect them to do with these books? Throw them out? If they haven't given up yet, they ask me if anyone in Patterson wants them. Poor Patterson. To get someone off the phone, I'll suggest a hospital or a nursing home. But I'm sure there's someone answering those phones whose job it is to tell them to call the library. It's an odd sort of charitable impulse that leads a person to a sense of outrage that no one wants something that's been sitting unwanted in their parents' basement for decades. Libraries are Dickensian orphans, apparently, and should be grateful for any little sip of gruel offered out of the goodness of a stranger's heart. And books are valuable because they are books, not because of anything in them, or of any alchemy that happens when the mind of a gifted writer touches the mind of an engaged reader. The indignant bibliophiles value books not too much, but too little. By lumping all books together as sacred objects that can never outlive their usefulness, no matter how useless, they denigrate the power of books that can ignite a firestorm in a reader's intellect, or tear a reader's soul with pathos or romance. If your mom's disintegrating mass-market copy of Valley of the Dolls is worthy of real estate on the shelves of a public library forever just because it was once printed on paper and bound into a codex, then how can The Origin of Species claim any special merit? Those are books too. Civilization is in a fraught historical moment in our relationship with books. As reading declines in each successive generation, and as content moves increasingly into digital form, we venerate the object of the book more. A guaranteed formula for a best-selling book in almost any genre, and this has been true since the first e-readers began to appear, is a book about a special, magical, ancient, or secret manuscript or scroll discovered and deciphered by a modern character who alone knows its true value. As we value and need books less for what they really are, we fetishize their form even more. Fetishize. An aside, I'm reading an article written by a librarian, and she has a master's, and so her English is really good to me. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of words here. I'm surprised at how many words. My English is pretty good, and I'm surprised at how many words in my native language I see here that I don't recognize or can even pronounce. It's wonderful. I find it challenging. I'm going to continue here. Perhaps you've even heard of a new Perhaps you have even heard of a fairly new craft technique called altered books, in which the artist takes an old hardcover book and through the use of cutting, tearing, painting, gluing, and other mixed media techniques, changes it to make something else. A purse, a hidden box, a greeting card, a picture frame. Something useful. I have to acknowledge, though, that my irritation at the bibliophiles, like most resentments, stems from consciousness of an identical shortcoming. My husband and I and our 2 children own several thousand books, the collateral damage of the 5 combined master's degrees my husband and I possess. The beautiful collection of children's books for our tween and teen, who have now outgrown the gorgeous picture books lovingly selected for them by friends and relatives and their adoring parents. My old tendency to buy at garage sales any book whose title or author I've heard of, and our love of books. Having weeded 3 libraries, I turn now to our own, where I can cheerfully chuck books that are falling apart, dated, or irrelevant to our current interests, but where I can never decide which of the 4 copies of Hamlet to toss, since each of them has either his notes or mine in them. Books commandeer every room, every surface. Yes, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the laundry room. Sometimes I wish I could hire a librarian to come over here and weed this house. She'd know exactly what to do.